There is a city in the middle of Russia called Now, most people watching this have never heard of it, and for most of the people who live there, this war has felt extraordinarily far away. Now, the city sits more than 1,100 kilometers from Ukraine, farther east than Moscow, out in the Republic of in a part of Russia far removed from the physical front line, on the morning of August 10th, 2026. The war arrived overhead again, but this time with devastating consequences. Air raid sirens, the buzz of engines, and tenfire, heavy black smoke rising over one of Russia's largest and most advanced oil refineries. By mid-morning, Ukraine had struck a major Russian oil hub, more than 1,100 kilometers from its own border. It was also one of the deadliest strikes on Russian soil in months. I'm going to be straight with you about that from the start because it matters. Russian authorities in Tatarstan said at least 13 people were killed, including a child, and dozens more wounded when drones hit both industrial and civilian sites across the city. Reporting says a hospital was among the buildings struck. And this is not a clean strike on an empty refinery. People died, far from any front line, in a city more than 1,100 kilometers from Ukraine. That's the human weight of what happened. Now, let me show you the strategic story underneath it, because Nizhnekamsk wasn't a single strike. It was one bright, terrible dot inside one of the largest drone nights of the entire war. And that night says something about where this war's going that Moscow cannot easily answer. Let me just start by gearing up a number that you're going to be seeing everywhere. You'll see the figure 456 drones. And you'll see headlines that make it sound like a single swarm of hundreds of machines descending on one place. But that's not what it means. And I'm not going to sell you the exaggerated version. That number comes from Russia's own defense ministry, and it's a claim about interceptions. The total number of Ukrainian drones, it says, its air defenses shot down overnight, spread across around 15 to 17 different regions of Russia, plus occupied Crimea. It never says how many got through, but sit with the real shape of that claim for a second, because it's arguably more alarming than the myth. Russia is saying that in a single night, it was defending against Ukrainian drones over more than 15 regions at once. From the border areas near Ukraine to the outskirts of Moscow to 1,000 kilometers deep. Not one arrow. A storm scattered across a landmass that spans time zones. That's a story, not one big swarm. An entire country lining up at once. And here's the part that turns that raw number into a weapon. Not every drone in that count is even carrying a warhead. Ukraine's deep strike units have said openly that they mix decoys into their raids. Some drones empty, some armed. All of them looking the same on a radar screen. The defenders got no way to tell which in the moment. So, Russia is forced to react to every single trick. Scramble crews, burn interceptors, light up radars, sometimes to shoot down a cheap piece of foam pretending to be a bomb. And that's the trap inside the swarm. The more drones you send, the more of the enemy's expensive. Limited defenses you force into the air. And the more real weapons slip through behind the noise. And where the deepest blow landed is what makes it such a problem for Russia. Nizhnekamsk is not a random town. It's one of the crown jewels of Russia's oil economy. The city is home to Tatnefte's TANECO refinery, one of the largest and most technologically advanced refineries in the entire country. A plant with a reported throughput of more than 16 million tons of crude a year. Ukraine's general staff said its forces struck that refinery and set it on fire. And Tatarstan itself was not entirely untouched before this. The same complex was hit by a smaller strike back in 2024. But for most of the war, this deep region felt insulated, and this time the strike came as part of a coordinated national barrage, of far more behind it, greater than. But now, why does a refinery more than 1,100 km from the war matter? Enough for Ukraine to reach all that way? Because refineries turn crude oil into the diesel and gasoline that move, Russian tanks, trucks, and jets, and into the exports that help pay for the invasion. That's the campaign. Ukraine has run hard through 2026. Strike the refineries, choke the fuel, and the money. How much lasting damage this particular strike did to TANECO isn't yet clear. Ukraine reported a fire, and the full assessment is still coming, and the reach that carried it there didn't exist a couple of years ago. Ukraine built it. At the center of the deep strike campaign is a homegrown drone called the Ukrainian for Fierce, a propeller-driven one-way attack aircraft designed by Antonov with a range reported between 1,000 and 2,000 kilometers and a unit cost around $200,000, cheap by the standards. of anything that flies that far, and Ukraine is not building them one at a time. One major manufacturer says the country is turning out, roughly, 200 long-range strike drones every single day, with room to scale higher. The result is a curve that Russia can measure. By its own figures, Ukrainian drone attacks jumped from around 6,000 pulgadas 2024 to more than 23,000 in 2025, a more than fourfold rise. And back in March 2026, one of Russia's most senior security figures, speaking in the admitted that the thing that Moscow spent years denying, that no region of Russia is now immune to Ukrainian drones. Nizhnekamsk is what that admission looks like, in practice. But the deeper story of August 10th isn't any single refinery. It's the map. But think about the problem Russia is now facing on a single night. Ukrainian drones forced it to respond across more than 15 regions at once, from the border to the deep interior. Now, stretch that across the largest country on earth. Protect Moscow. Protect the strategic air bases. Protect the refineries. Protect the ports. Protect the military factories. Every one of them's a target that Ukraine might reach. Scattered across 11 time zones. Russia doesn't simply drag one S-400 from one city to another every time a drone appears. Its air defense is far more tangled than that. But the underlying problem doesn't go away. No country can give every strategic asset the same density of protection at once. Strategic depth still protects Russia the space to disperse, to relocate, to absorb. But long-range drones are steadily eroding the protection that distance alone provides, the same geography that gives. Russia, its enormous depth, also hands Moscow an enormous amount of territory to defend, and every kilometer Ukraine adds to its strike radius, adds another set of sites that Moscow has to think about. Think about? And that's what a night like August 10th is really designed to prove. Not that any one refinery burned, but that the zone that Russia can treat as comfortably beyond Ukrainian reach keeps shrinking. Ukraine's home-built long-range drones have pushed past 2,000 kilometers this year, with the deepest strikes reaching Siberia. Against that, a city 1,100 kilometers deep is no longer a safe distance. But there's another part of August 10th that doesn't fit neatly into a triumphant story. Those 13 deaths in Nizhnekamsk were real, and civilian areas of the city were hit. Russian investigators say residential buildings were struck and have opened a case calling it a terrorist attack. Russia's invasion has killed Ukrainian civilians on a vastly larger scale in Kyiv. Argue that energy facilities feeding Russia's war economy are legitimate military targets. But neither of those facts erases what happened in Nish. Civilians were killed. And as long-range attacks push deeper into both countries, the physical separation between the battlefield and the home front keeps narrowing. As long-range strikes expand, the front line stops behaving like a line at all. So, let's be careful about what August 10th does and doesn't mean. Russia says it intercepted 456 drones. Its air defenses have not collapsed, and one burning refinery will not change the war. But that's not the test. Ukraine is setting music. The test is whether Russia can keep doing this night after night. 15 regions tonight. A refinery 1,100 kilometers away. Another target tomorrow from another direction the night after that. Ukraine doesn't need every drone to get through. It needs enough of them often enough to keep forcing Moscow to choose what to protect and what to leave exposed. That's how the arithmetic of Russian safety changes. Not in one spectacular night, but in the grinding accumulation of them. For the towns around those refineries, it's darker. The war they watched on television for 4 years has arrived in the sky above them. In the next raid, they'll already be in the air.